Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Dear viewers, as you have been watching a promo for Gaza-Israel conflict, Gaza is an enclave, I must say, Gaza Strip is an enclave area of Palestine. In 1994, Israel gave autonomous right to Palestinians, but then afterwards, they didn't stop killing people, bombarding that area. Almost now, due to current bombardment, 44% of Gaza Strip has been declared as an area where nobody can live now. If anybody would want to go there and live, they would be having a paralyzed children, indeed. Gaza Strip numbered around 1.82 million people. The large Palestinian refugee population makes it among the most densely populated parts of the world. However, in 1948, there was a Palestinian government in Gaza. Then afterwards, in 1967, Israel tried occupying Palestine. Then in 2005, Israel's unilateral disengagement, in which they bombarded that strip of Gaza in the same way which you could see these days in news channels. Then afterwards, in 2007, Hamas took over. Now there are certain questions which arise from this. As Israel says, they're fighting in their self-defense. They blame Hamas for everything, but Hamas took place in 2007. What about the situation before that? They are saying they fight for self-defense. Further on, they say God promised them the land. Now the question is, did God promise them that they would be having a power to kill these innocent children? Did God promise them that they will kill innocent children, will get into the heavens? Now these are the questions which we are going to ask the members of our panel. Before I introduce them, I would like to mention lines are open. You're more than invited to call and put your comments to our panel. I would like to start off by introducing Dr. Beg Mustafa, who is a lecturer in University of Exeter, Islamic Studies Department. We welcome you in our program.
Thank you very much.
Next to him is Glenn Saker, who is a member of Executive Committee of Jews for Justice for Palestinians. We welcome you in our program. Next to him is Barrister Tariq Khan, who is also a counselor in Coventry for Fawzil Road. Tariq, we welcome you in our program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And next to him is Rabbi Shimon Keys, who represents the organization Jews Against Zionism. Keys, we welcome you in our program. Now, viewers, we would like to get the views first from our learned panel. Then afterwards, we will put our questions, not just our question, the questions of the public, which are normally asked, but remain unanswered. I would like to start off by Dr. Beg Mustafa, that he expresses his views about Gaza-Israel conflict. Yes, Dr. Sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you to takbbeer TV for having me on this program, and for Sultan Bahu Trust to take the initiative basically and organize a program of such importance, because often our youth are complaining and even crying out that TV channels or the representatives of the community are not speaking the voice of the youth or answering questions what many people are asking in terms of current affairs, contemporary issues, and the most pressing problems that we face as communities locally, nationally, and also globally. There's a number of ways we can, a number of angles from which we can tackle this topic. Everyone's been watching the TV screens with great distress about what's happening to the Palestinians. in Gaza especially, and surrounding areas. And it's not a new, it's been happening for many decades now, and the international community still fails to stop this from happening. One of the things that I was asked to speak about before coming onto this program by my brother Ahmad was, often what we see is that this Israeli-Palestine conflict that we are all seeing before us, which is perhaps worse than it has ever been for the last few years at least, is a clash between Muslims and Jews. Often it's been portrayed by certain people of the far right that Muslims wish to exterminate the Jews, so the Jewish people of Israel are in a sort of existential battle to defend themselves against Muslim terrorism or Muslim militancy or Muslim objectives, aims to rid the face of the earth, sometimes it's said, from Jews. But if you look at this historically, it's actually very, very different. I would argue that in Islam and in the Muslim world in general, historically speaking, there has never really been a Muslim-Jewish problem, or what's in modern European terms often called an anti-Semitic problem. I'll try to talk about this term later on. In fact, if you look at academic studies and historians when they discuss the topic, a number of different historians, professors, for example, a professor of Jewish history in Germany, Professor David Wasserstein, he makes a case that if it was not for Islam and not for Muslims, then Jewry, or the claim that he makes in very straight terms, is that Islam actually saved Jewry. And if it was not for Islam and the coming of the Prophet in the year 570, Judaism was actually on its way to oblivion. And how he argues the particular case was that not only did Islam save Judaism, but Judaism actually flourished under Islam. Because in the Christian West, under the Roman Empire, Jews were being persecuted, many of them being converted to Christianity. In fact, forced conversions were rife. So much of the conversions were done largely by force. And between the 4th and the 7th centuries, Jews in the Christian West had basically lost all their rights, social, legal, political, and had become non-entities. No question of citizenship, legal rights, and they began reducing in numbers vastly. Now, although in the East, Judaism did flourish under the Persian Empire, it was in Babylon where perhaps the greatest work, I know the trainee rabbi here can talk better on this, the Talmud was produced in Babylon. So the greatest works after the Bible for Judaism were actually produced in the East. But due to the constant wars between the Persian and the Roman Empire, the Jews in Babylon and in Persia became cut off from Jews in the Roman Empire in Byzantium. And because they had then become cut off, Jews under the Roman Empire then started to lose access even to their core texts, because their cultural and religious languages began to be replaced by Latin and Greek. So they lost access to the Torah, to the Midrash, and to the Mishnah, to liturgy, and so on. And now this separation was causing Jews in the Christian world to lose complete contact with their faith. And Jews in the Persian Empire started to take shape, or Judaism in the Persian Empire started to take shape, and inevitably would have become like an Oriental cult. That's what the historians and the scholars have argued. What happens in the year 570 when the Prophet is born, and within 1 century of that, peace be upon him, within a century of that, Muslims are ruling practically the entire world where Jews live at this particular point. And suddenly, or within quite a sudden period of time, if you're looking at within 100 years, then Jews who live across the world suddenly become connected by this unified Islamic caliphate. So the Jews of Spain, North Africa, Middle East and Persia are all again now connected together, and there is free passage to each of these lands. And what you actually have there is that Muslims gave Jews, as being people of the book, proper legal status. And within this Islamic milieu, you'll see that Jews begin to flourish. They get their social rights, legal rights, political rights. And from a persecuted community, they become a community that is now flourishing. Hebrew Bible gets translated by Sa'diyya in Islamic Spain. It's in Islamic Spain and in the Muslim world, which is a very interesting fact, where you see the Jewish Golden Age. The Jewish Golden Age actually coincides with the Islamic Golden Age. Jews began to speak and learn Arabic. So you see a symbiosis between Jewish flourishing and the Jewish intellectual age with the Islamic intellectual Golden Age also partnering with the Jewish intellectual and the Jewish Golden Age. And this is what has allowed, in this particular period, the Judaism to flourish both, not only religiously did it survive, but it flourished culturally and intellectually, producing the figures like Maimonides, probably the most important Jewish thinker in history, among the most important Jewish thinkers in history. Scholars like Maimonides, they wrote in Judeo-Arabic. The language that they wrote and communicated in was in Judeo-Arabic, and then their works afterwards were translated into Hebrew. So what these historians and these scholars argue is that if it was not for the Muslim world, then it's quite possible that Jewry and Judaism could have went into oblivion. But instead of going into oblivion, it not only survived, but it actually flourished in many parts of the Muslim world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have given a detailed outlook, but I must say, express the history in a few words. Further, before I ask you further questions, I would like to move on towards Glenn Seekers, who is representing or is a member of Executive Committee of Jews for Justice for Palestinians, that he tells a bit about the current situation of Gaza-Israel conflict. Yes.
I'm not going to talk about the biblical history and the history of Islam.
But what do you think that, because in the past we have seen, as I explained in my opening words,
yes,
that there was a clash, there was a ceasefire, then Israel broke that. So how do you look overall in the current situation, considering the history as well as the current situation? How would you express your views?
When you said, when you just asked the question now, Israel blocked it, what you're talking about, you're talking about 1993, the after the Oslo Accords, or
exactly,
yeah,
1994,
okay,
yeah.
Yes, okay. I would like to give a different narrative,
okay,
and see how we develop from that narrative. There were, in my understanding, two strains of Jewish culture during the period of the 19th century, the second half of the 19th century, mainly centered on what is now Eastern Europe and Russia. Obviously the national boundaries and identities were different then. And what developed there were two strains of Jewish culture which were, if you like, qualitatively different to the many thousand years of Jewish culture which had really existed in the forms of Orthodox Jewry, yeah, and various forms of beliefs, Jewish beliefs. What developed in the 19th century in that area of Eastern Europe was, on the one hand, a social and, to a certain extent, a socialist and certainly a humanist movement, which was occurring within the context of the industrialization of the region. The first industrial revolution was obviously in the UK, and then there was a very rapid expansion of industrialization and the beginnings of modern society in Eastern Europe and Russia. And that meant, as everywhere else in the world, people were migrating from the land into the towns. It meant the development of large groups of workers, depends what jargon you use, but a large working class. And they included, Jews were not by any means the majority, but it included large numbers of Jews, tens and tens of thousands of Jews, who worked in large factories, tobacco factories, clothing factories, and so on, and also worked in very large numbers of small workshops, sewing and making fabrics and clothing, and also making shoes and brushes, and owned by a very large number of small owners, and there were very few legal regulations, if any, on the basic working conditions, the wages, the time off work and holidays, and there was no provision for health and welfare. And so what came out of that was an organisation called the Bund, B-U-N-D.
Okay.
And it was a welfare organisation and a trade union and a political party, all those aspects rolled into one. And it grew to considerable strength and was a component of that whole revolutionary period of ferment leading into up to the First World War, the Russian Revolution. They allied with the principally with the Mensheviks, sure, if you like, a bit like the left wing of the Labour Party in the UK here, just to identify them. But they worked with the Revolutionary Party, the Bolsheviks. But the key point in terms of the dominant experience of Jews who have been subjected to pogroms, to anti-Semitism by the Tsarist regimes over that period, their prime reaction to that was to say, we do not believe the solution is a nationalist and separatist solution based on the acquisition of land. We believe the solution is to change the nature of the society within which we live, to eradicate racism and the particular form of racism which is anti-Semitism.
This was a belief of Jews.
And this was the set of the programs that were produced by the Bund and the associated political and social parties. So it wasn't a religious based, although creed, although obviously it included people who were practicing and of various levels of Jewish conviction. And at the same time there occurred the Zionist movement, which to begin with was very small and was in the same period of the end of the 19th, the second half of the 19th century.
Okay.
And it remained small and it remained in the minority politically. And then what happened was that during the course of the First World War, the whole movement, of which the Bund and the Jewish communities were very much part, suffered an amazing defeat.
Considering this point, sorry to interrupt you, that you mean Zionism is separate from Judaism?
Yes, it was a clear nationalist movement. In fact, the founding Zionists were not religious.
So what about the view, like these Zionists who are killing these innocent Palestinians, they claim that God promised them the land?
Okay, let me come on to that, because that's a central point.
Okay.
You're right to raise it. So what happened was that the Bund and all the social and political organizations that were in and around it, they suffered defeat and they were just disintegrated as the whole Russian revolutionary movement was also disintegrated during the course of the war. You had the Russian Revolution in 1917. 3-4 years later, it collapsed. One of the main reasons it collapsed was that much of its leadership were out in the First World War in the trenches and got massacred, and the massacres were extensive. The Russians and people fighting from that side of the fronts lost tens of millions of people. You know, it's far more than were lost in Europe, for example. Not necessarily recognised very well. So that all collapsed, and that gave the field open to the rise of Stalinism and the re-establishment of racism, of pogroms, of anti-Semitism, and Stalin, in making sure that he kept power, exterminated everyone and anyone who put their heads up above the parapet to oppose him. So he killed about 20 million people, which is not recognised properly today. And so we have a huge setback in the social developments in that period. But it meant that the field then opened up to the Zionists, and they began to organise their nationalist and separatist program. And to begin with, right at the beginning, their program was to acquire a land exclusively for Jewish people. There were some rather odd ideas about where this land should be to start with. Uganda was, what's now Uganda was proposed. Some areas of Argentina were once proposed. Some areas right in the east of the Urals were proposed in Russia. But in the end, they decided that logically they had to choose Palestine. And the reason that was chosen was that with the literal interpretation of the Bible, the two halves of the Bible, the Torah and the New Testament, it was possible to, as Ben-Gurion, who was one of the founders of Israel, stated, that it was their title deeds to the land. They began to use it as a real estate folio, to put it in American jargon, because they could say with a literal reading that they had a title to the land going back 3,500 years or whatever. And because the Bible, after the whole period of the rise of Protestantism...
Well, I would like you to just conclude that, because we've got the callers now. Calls are coming. So if you could just describe this in a nutshell, how would you describe that?
How would I describe?
Yes.
You were saying, just conclude the point. It's a very interesting one you're making at this moment.
We will get back to it. We're not going to leave it, because that's the most important point at the moment, which is of debate, I must say.
Sorry, I lost your point. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that you were telling about they chose Palestine.
Yes.
So compare that situation with the current situation.
With the
current situation.
The current situation.
Yeah.
Well, what was established then was there was the person who set the program out was a guy called Jabotinsky. That there should be Jewish land, Jewish labour and Jewish produce by legal means, financial means and physical means. And that set the program for what I describe as the fundamentalist Zionists. And that has been the program ever since. It went through, if you like, a less aggressive period between 1948, after the founding of Israel, and 1967, when the Israeli Labour Party was in power, and there was a less aggressive pursuit of those aims. And then after 1967, and the occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza and so on, you then got the reinstatement of a much more aggressive creed. And I would argue that it really took off after the, what I would say was the inevitable failure of the Oslo Accords in '93, because people were very optimistic both on the Jewish, in the Jewish diaspora, and in the, I'm uncomfortable with the word Jewish diaspora actually, but within the Jews around the world, within Israel, and also a lot of optimism amongst the Palestinians themselves. And my complaint is they didn't read the small print. And the small print was that the water would be given to Mekarot, the Israeli water company, which sells it back to the Palestinians at 5 times the price that it sells it to the settlers and the Israelis. It fragmented the land. It drove Palestinian farmers off the land into free trade zones, no laws governing wages, working conditions, time at work. It created the Palestine Authority to supervise this process, gave the Palestine Authority Area A, which is about 2% of the land, then divided the rest, B and C, very unfairly. And the final settlement for a peace arrangement was meant to happen 5 years after Oslo, on the basis that it would give the Palestine Authority time to develop a viable Palestinian economy. The problem was the economy was completely controlled by major banks, rigorous, ruthless free market liberalism, and that development never occurred. And at the end, towards the end of the 5 years anyway, the Israelis then moved the goalposts back to 10 years. The dissatisfaction amongst the Palestinians meant that when the elections came along, properly supervised by the United Nations as fair elections, Hamas won, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. The Palestine Authority, backed by Israel and the Americans, wrested back control from Hamas in the West Bank, but couldn't do it in Gaza. So when they then began to solidify their support and their position in Gaza, that led to the imposition. Israel then imposed the blockade and put the Palestinians, to quote one general, on a diet, put them at subsistence level. Another general quoted as saying, no Gazan dies of old age anymore. In other words, not sufficient medical provision, proper water, food, for
well,
people
this is the same situation as the current one, isn't it?
Yeah, and so you have the entrenchment of the situation, a collective punishment of the people of Gaza.
We'll carry on from there. Thank you. I would just like to take a call. The call is on hold. Hello.
Hi there, mate.
Yeah, who's there?
Yeah, my name's Jonathan.
Jonathan.
I was just flicking through your channel, basically.
Okay.
And you guys are talking about Gaza.
Yep.
And about the terrorists, Zionist Jews. Basically, the people that are killing innocent civilians in Gaza. It makes me laugh that David Cameron, he's very quick at jumping at Iraq and Christians that are stuck on a mountain. You know, if they're stuck on a mountain, what about the people that are in a concentration camp in the Gaza Strip? They're blocked from all 4 ways. It's like, I made an example. I said to a Jew, what if I come into your back garden and I took your back garden and I said, you've got no way out of here, you come, someone's blocking your front, blocking your rear, what would you do? You know, and his answer was, we would attack you. So this is exactly what the Palestinians are doing. You know, the Palestinians are defending themselves. Are they not human? You know, David Cameron has got double standard. He's taking backhanders of the bloody Zionists.
But my friend, I would just like to mention, it is not just David Cameron, but there are loads of people, politicians, as the case has been taken before United Nations, and Israel has requested states to veto that. There are loads of things to go forward, and we would like to carry on with this view that why not all of the states in the world are taking action against Israel. I will further expand it.
This is it. Why don't people take action? This is the cowards. You know, look at Egypt. Okay, Egypt and Pakistan. Apparently, I've read an article that Saudi Arabia have asked these 2 countries to come and help us in case ISIS come into our territory in Saudi Arabia. What kind of nonsense is that? You know, can't Saudi Arabia defend itself? The bloody cowards, the wealthiest country, they've got so much money, and what do? You know, they just abuse their bloody privileges and abuse their powers. You know, exactly what George Bush done going into Iraq. What was the need?
Well, this is the main concern, my friend. This is the main concern at the moment. And the people are saying the same thing, as I will further expand this. The Saudi, which is an Arabic state, not just Saudi, if you consider all of the Muslim world, if they just unite against this, I don't think Israel will be able to, or these Zionists will be able to live in this world without having punishment, or without having results of what they have done. I would like to further carry on that this is a great message for all of the Muslim world, I must say, that they should unite, they should stand, sharing a hand with each other and help these poor people or innocent Palestinians. If at this time we won't unite, then I'm forced to say, you can see the situation in Afghanistan. You can see the situation in Iraq. Iraq just broke 2 resolutions, and that country was bombed. Saddam Hussein was hanged to death. And Israel has broken more than 50 resolutions. No action has been taken against that. Former Prime Minister John Prescott mentioned, if this would be any other country other than Israel, West would have put economic sanctions onto them and would have threatened that country with military actions. This is a big question, and this is a concern for the public. As I asked one of the learned panel, Barrister Rambi de Mello, who has represented his clients before the European Courts of Human Rights, I asked the same question, and he replied, this is because of political reasons. And if these people won't unite, there's going to be a big problem, my friends. Thank you very much for your call. And we couldn't take this call for a long time. I'm really sorry, we need to drop the call. By the way, I would like to carry on with Barrister Tariq Khan now. Tariq, how do you see this current situation where Israelis are bombarding these innocent Palestinians and are claiming that this is their self-defense?
Well, the situation is absolutely deplorable, and you know, when we look at the screens every night, we are deeply disturbed by what we are seeing. We see a defenseless nation, a defenseless people on the outskirts of their own territory, of their own land, who are unable to do anything, and they are being basically obliterated, and it's sickening to see that you know, the persecution that they have to endure. And what makes me really sick to the bone is that the countries in which we are living in, for example here in the United Kingdom and other civilized nations around the world, they know what's happening. They know the horror that's being meted out to the Palestinian people. And they know that they are being persecuted, that they are being massacred. And do you know what? They are actually turning a blind eye. And in reality, if you look at our political leaders, if you look at the Prime Minister, calls have been made that he must change his policy in relation to Israel. Saida Warsi, a senior minister, recently resigned over this issue because she told him that your policy in relation to Israel is absolutely and utterly morally indefensible. All that we see in response to her resignation and her demands for a change in the policy is basically, well, you know, she's gone now and people won't know that, you know, who was Saida Warsi. This is the sort of response we're getting. And the fact of the matter is, we've got a very pro-Israeli, extremely pro-Israeli establishment. And you see, it's in that situation where, you see, we must do something. And you know, we may think, I mean, when I witnessed what was happening, the horrors as they were unfolding on our screens, and we saw, you know, nearly 2,000 Palestinians have just been obliterated. You know, I felt, you know, gosh, what do I do? You know, I can't do anything. I can't make a change. I can't ensure that lives are saved. All you can do, you know, I thought to myself is, well, you know, just contribute financially to help them with aid, medical supplies and all that. And we were doing that.
But if we are doing that, and if you contribute financially, your aid is not going to reach there. By the way, Tariq, I'm going to come back to you. We have got a caller. Hello.
Hello, my name is Sajid.
We can't really hear you.
Can you hear me now? My name is Sajid.
What's your name?
Sajid.
Sajid.
Yeah,
Okay, where are you calling from?
Halifax.
Okay, my friend, what would you like to say?
My name is. What I would like to say is, where is Hamas and where are the bombers? Why are they bombing? Where's the photographic evidence?
Exactly, my friend. This is a concern. As you might have listened to my opening words, in that I mentioned in 1994, Israel bombarded this Gaza Strip, and Hamas was just created in 2007 in response to the war which was started by Israel in 2005. This is the main concern. The loads of the people, I must say, but I will say it in other words, that we are not being informed properly by the media.
That's correct.
We are being informed that this is Hamas, in response to which there are airstrikes. But the question arises, are the people representing Hamas in hospitals where young or innocent children are being treated upon?
I have not seen anything. I have not seen anybody with, this is to all the panel, I want to know, the photographic evidence. Everything is photographic evidence nowadays. Where is it? I want to see a Hamas soldier. I haven't seen nobody. It's been a month going now. People are dying. All I see is kids dying every day. Then they send the United Nations, the guys who are working there. Why can't they show where the Hamas is? There's nothing. There is no Hamas. I feel sorry for the people.
Well, my friend, thank you very much for your call. Everybody is sorry for that. But again, the thing is, there are political reasons behind that. If Israel could say to United Nations HRC as a kangaroo court and no action has been taken against them, if the charges are trying to be brought against Israel but are being vetoed in United Nations, what else we could do? France has put ban on pro-Palestinian processions. And as Tariq was saying, that this world or most of the nations are supporting Israel. People have turned blind eye towards these innocent Palestinians. I would like to carry on with Tariq, but before I go towards him, we have got a new caller. Hello. Hello.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Who is there?
My name is Mohammed. I'd just like to raise a point for Mr. Tariq. I'm sure he's aware of. I don't know what the age group is, but as far as I'm aware, the Zionists that live across Europe or wherever they may live, when they go back to Israel, when they go back to the Zionists, they still must join the IDF, or the army is called, to fight for their country. But why is an issue? Why is this not clarified? Why are they not getting done under the terrorism laws, or how are they escaping that? But where some of the youngsters or the Muslims go across and they get caught, they get done for terrorism, exploited all over the media. So justice needs to be done across the board, not just for one individual country or one individual race, which is Islam. If you can give me some clarity on that, please. Thank you.
People who serve in the IDF will return to the UK. What's the kind of legal consequences for such?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, actually, a very pertinent question.
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
At this moment in time, and I actually wholly, absolutely agree with the point that's being made here. These people, if people are going from here to Syria and when they return home, they're going to be prosecuted as terrorists or assisting in terrorist activity. I think those people who are doing the same for the Israeli state should be meted out with the same sort of treatment when they come back here in the United Kingdom. It's really as simple as that. There's got to be, a proportionate sort of way of dealing with this. If you have Muslims who are being prosecuted, I beg your pardon, then certainly, members of the Jewish community who actually who are pro-Israeli, who go to support the Israeli state against the Palestinians, they are to be treated in a very similar manner. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Very good point he made it.
The legal position on that, I'm not defending it, but the legal position, as far as I understand it, correct me, the British law is that if people go to fight as a member of a foreign army, that is recognised as legally as an okay thing to do. Legally, it's allowed. they go to fight for an organisation which is not defined as a foreign army, then they're subject to these laws of joining terrorist organisations. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying that's my understanding of how British law stands at the moment. So if the people, the organisations fighting in Syria at the moment are defined by the British establishment as terrorist organisations, then they the people who do that fall foul of English law. But if they go and fight for the Foreign Legion in France or the IDF or the American forces, then they're recognised as established fighting forces, and that's permitted under English law. That's my understanding of it.
But that's an absurd thing, isn't it? And that's bias, I must say. I'm really sorry to say, but this is. By the way, we got a new caller. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, who's there?
My name's Ash from Leighton.
Can you please speak a bit louder?
Yeah, my name's Ash from Leighton, London.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say basically that since all of this has been happening, I've been attending loads of these protests in London. And what surprises me is that the public, the amount of public, and I think people need to recognize that this is not just a religious issue. Yeah, this is a humanitarian issue now. Yeah, first and foremost, to look at that, the innocents that are being killed. The second part, if people do want to look at it as a religious issue, I think you have to identify, you still cannot class this as a religious issue because Zionist is not religion, it's a nationalist movement. And I think people like Baroness Warsi, who resigned, I think have to be commended, because I think a lot of Muslim politicians in this country, to some degree, still get slated for their views and their dealings in politics, mainstream politics. But I think what she did there is stood up, made her voice be heard, regardless how highly the Tories actually think of her. I think she might have been placed as a token gesture at the beginning, but I think she's made a magnificent sound just by taking away and saying, you know what you're doing? It's totally wrong. But I do think that organizations, I think you guys as media have a role to play in this, not just by holding programs like this, to make people aware of what is really happening out there. Yeah, we need to see real pictures. We need to see the arguments against Hamas. You know, if they're throwing bombs, I think we have to understand why they're throwing bombs. If your house is being burgled, you're going to do something to protect it. You know, and when you've gone through decades and decades, or years and years leading up to decades, of oppression, everyone has this point where they will say, okay, you know what, I need to do something. And in my eyes, I think people have to understand one thing in this country and many other Western countries. I think one of your panel said civilized nation. I don't think there are civilized nations existing. I think what it is, you have to understand that people, when these children grow up and they lose their family, they see their parents being killed in front of them, they see their mothers being dragged away, parents see their children being killed. The people that see that becomes their way of life. They have nothing to fear.
Exactly. This is a point. This is a point. Very good point you have made, my friend. I'm sorry I interrupted you. This is the most important point. That when a child who's 10 years old, who has seen his father and mother died, what do you think would he do? He's definitely going to fight against the state which has shot his father or parents died. By the way, I would like to answer to one of your questions, that this is a matter for humanity, not just for Palestinians. By the way, my friend, you could see the situation in Iraq. No justification has been given so far. You have seen the situation in Afghanistan. America now accepts that they have wasted their time by sending the forces into Afghanistan. I've got loads of videos which we can't play on the media, in which one of the persons in the Pentagon who had joined Afghani force, he mentioned that America has planned to destabilize Middle East, starting off with Syria. Then they are going to move towards Somalia, South Sudan, then Iran. My question to the people is, in Somalia or South Sudan, people don't have sufficient to eat. What sort of crime they have done that they are planning to bombard that country? By the way, these are just political reasons. This is just to destabilize Middle East, and West might want power. My friend, I'm really sorry to mention, then there might not be an absolute answer, as loads of people are leading processions. Glenn, he was one of the parties to the processions. He mentioned to me on his way to the studio that thousands or hundreds of thousands of people joined it. Am I right?
150,000.
150,000 people joined in procession. But what is the outcome? And this is the question which I'm going to ask to Tariq. As you're in council, you're in politics, so don't you think that state needs to take an action? Otherwise, they're not going to respect the rights for humans. If you just come out into the streets, just call the processions, they won't care for that.
Well, of course, absolutely. The state should take action, and it should stop supporting those nations. And it should stop supporting those nations or tolerate those nations who are involved in committing serious human rights abuses. At this moment in time, our state, unfortunately, is supporting the state of Israel, and whilst it knows that it's actually committing gross human rights violations and massacring people on a daily basis. The fact is, what do we do about it? We know this is the reality. What do we do? And I tell you what we do. We do what organizations like our friend here belongs to, is that we go out onto the streets and we make our demonstrations. That's just part of the response that we can do. But I think we should do whatever we can do. In reality, we would like to go there and if we can dismantle the military structure of the Israeli forces, of course we would like to do that, but we can't do that. So what can we do here in the United Kingdom? And what we can do, let me just finish, what we can do is, we must first of all lobby our parliamentarians, our MPs, and we must put as much force in our plea to them as possible. We have vast numbers here. A lot of these people are sitting in seats that they could lose quite easily, they're marginal seats. And we must use our force as the electorate and use our numbers to actually tell them that firm action is needed on their part to actually not support the state of Israel, and to ask them to do something about what's really happening out there.
But I think you should start from the government departments, isn't it?
We should start first of all at the local level, and then locally we then need to approach our MPs, and our MPs we must ensure that they then take our views forward to Parliament.
So how many people do you want? Because there are loads of procession, 150,000 people into the streets, but no action has been taken so far.
I think. Remember when there was the mass demonstration against the Iraq war? How many people turned out to the city of London? We had 1 million people. It was a 1 million-man march, wasn't it?
Literally, yeah.
Literally, it was. And you see, these people, they actually represented. There were actually many millions more, because those people who were present at the demonstration, at the march, actually represented many more people. So we had the whole nation. We had the whole nation against the government of the day, pleading with the government, Mr. Blair, please don't go to war. But yet he did.
I will come back to you. Dear viewers, we need to take a short break. After break, we'll be right back. Please don't go nowhere.